Hey guys, so today's topic is one that's been of a lot of importance in my life, and it's about the words awakening and enlightenment. These are words that are used all over the place on YouTube and spiritual circles. And one of the things that I notice is that defining these terms, define awakening, defining enlightenment, is one of the hot topics in the spiritual community. It's a very common question, and it's a very common question to be answered. And so I will never use either word if I can help it for a few reasons. The first reason would be based on something Rupert Spira said, which is that when we use words like this, hopefully I'm quoting or paraphrasing him correctly. When we use words like this, there's an implication of an exotic or extraordinary, marvelous experience. That seems to be implied in a word like enlightenment. We picture Buddhahood, perfection, omniscience, in one irrevocable shift. Spiritual awakening could be used in a lot of different contexts, and it is used in a lot of different contexts. And that also implies, it seems to suggest an extraordinary experience. And any experience that we chase is going to be in the realm of experience. It's going to come and go. If we feel that we need an extraordinary experience, I think Nisargadatta said something about this. He's like, if you want ever-present eternal ecstasy, your body isn't even built for that. The circuitry of the body will just like destruct if you were to have round-the-clock ecstasy. And these terms seem to suggest exalted states, and they seem to imply a lot of perfection, right? Like one might think, if I'm enlightened, then I'm perfect. Everything I do, even when I talk with that irritating relative, I'm just going to act perfect. I'm not going to ever have a reaction and get triggered inside. I'm never going to have any divisive thoughts. I'm suddenly a saint as a result of one experience. There's a tremendous expectation built in there, it seems to me. After spiritual awakening, I will be like Adyashanti. I will be an enlightened guru. I will be a sage. I will be perfect. There's some saying about the only gurus that are perfect are the ones that are long dead. Because every couple of years, we may elevate them a little bit higher and higher in terms of their godlike status. And then you have, over 2,000 years later, you have Jesus, who is just absolute perfection. Of course, he's been dead for thousands of years. So we don't see the moments where he snaps at his friend for saying something stupid. And another big issue with using either of these words, as far as I'm concerned, is that they're a spiritual selling point. Awakening and enlightenment sell like no other. They're incredibly enticing. Who doesn't want an experience that can instantly fix all of their problems and make them perfect? Like, that's literally like the mind's dream of what it wants. And it opens the door for corrupt behavior in some cases. Of course, not in all cases, but if the teacher has enlightenment and can, in various marketed ways, sell that enlightenment to the student, that's quite a sales pitch. That's quite a selling point. And it can then justify expensive one-on-one sessions. It can justify feeling the need to go on many thousands of dollar retreats. And I'm not saying this is the dynamic that's prevalent or common. I don't really know if it is or not in retreats. I'm just saying that it opens the door for it opens the spiritual marketplace in a sense where there's no commodity more prized and more worth buying than enlightenment, than spiritual awakening. And I think it's a very delicate balance as people who take on the role of spiritual teacher. How do you navigate that? Do you have sliding scale rates? Do you make everything free? Of course, that isn't a very feasible solution for retreats because then the teacher has no money. And we're kind of getting off topic. I think I'm tangenting a bit here. So I wanted to suggest an alternative to these terms rather than just deconstruct them and tear them apart and not suggest an alternative. And I would say there are teachers, for example, Rupert Spira, who use this terminology for the most part. And it would be to replace the words awakening and enlightenment with a term like self-recognition or self-realization. And actually, these terms are much more specific to the point than something like awakening. Something like enlightenment, which could mean 1,000 different things. We even use the word enlightenment in like completely different contexts, like it was an enlightening talk. But anyways, getting carried away again. So terms like self-recognition, self-realization, not only are they simple, it's clear what's being referred to. They're actually probably less ambiguous than the alternatives. And they don't imply marvelous, ecstatic experience. They hint at simplicity, the knowledge of our own self. What would be more intimate? What would be more simple than our own being? Another term that seems to be useful is a glimpse, right? We could talk about a glimpse of true nature. And maybe there's some ambiguity. Are we referring to a glimpse that is self-recognition? Or are we referring to an experience of extraordinary beauty, an extraordinary inner silence? Are we referring to awareness of our own being? So if we throw out the door terms like awakening, enlightenment, we substitute in self-recognition or self-realization or some other term. These are just the ones that work for me personally. Then there's a new question raised, which is basically, how do we describe the process after self-recognition? I think there's a saying, post-recognition sadhana. Because it seems that for many people, the cases like, we hear stories like Ramana Maharshi having an inner death experience when he was a teenager, which seemed to basically be a total falling away of the sense of separation. And then he proceeded to live eventually under a mountain for the rest of his life. We have these extreme cases of people like that. Or Eckhart Tolle, who experienced what he described in the beginning of The Power of Tao, a disidentification and then a falling into what he described as a void, and then a total surrender. We have these cases of people where there's a clearly differentiated moment after which everything was different. And perhaps these people have near total stability in that understanding. But for many people, it seems that there's oscillation between standing as true nature and forgetting and re-identifying as a person, and that there's a process. So I wanted to describe this process as an integration process, right? So anything post-recognition could then be described as an integration process where that initial understanding then translates and infiltrates into all areas of our life, our relationships, our work, driving, conversations with people, going to the grocery store. Everything becomes an expression of that understanding. So to kind of conclude, I feel that terms like awakening and enlightenment are tremendously detrimental, not just neutral or unhelpful, but actively unhelpful. It seems to pedestalize the quote unquote teacher. It it invites spiritual salesmanship. It suggests an extraordinary exotic experience that few people may ever experience and don't ever need to experience. And it sets up a saint-like ideal where we then feel our recognition is invalid if we're not acting perfect all the time. And this tremendous pressure to act perfect, like we envision the enlightened guru or the self-realized man to act, not leaving room for the inevitable imperfection of daily life. So I wanted to just kind of leave these replacement words, self-recognition, self-realization, and integration as a process of incorporating our insights into reality, into ourself, into daily life. I don't think there's any need to ever use terms like awakening or enlightenment. All right, thanks for watching.